Welcome everybody to Sustainable River Basin Management, Module 5, Part 4. We have been talking about how to evaluate sustainability in river basin management. And we talked about the pillars of sustainability, sustainability assessments, multi-criteria decision support, system thinking, and finally I want to come to sustainable development goals. The Sustainable Development Goals are following the Millennium Development Goals, or so-called MDGs. Those MDGs will come to an end in 2015. They started in 2000. There's an ongoing process of agreeing about the Sustainable Development Goals right now. And the relevance of this is that they should serve as a globally accepted benchmark against which results from the socio-economic processes are measured. Now let's briefly talk about these Millennium Development Goals. Those MDGs were based on the principle of moral obligation of the developed countries to assist the developing countries to grow and improve in socio-economic development. So those objectives from developing countries were transformed in, for example, in the field of health, in education, in water and sanitation, and so on. Now, the Sustainable Development Goals must be different. They must be action-oriented, they shall be concise, they shall be easy to communicate, they shall be limited in number, they should also be aspirational, they should be global in nature, and a very important paragraph, they should be universally applicable to all countries by taking into account different national realities, capacities, and levels of development, and respecting national policies and priorities. And this is the key part here, which is quite different to the MDGs and which is remarkable also for in the context of sustainable water resources management. We talk about this now. The Sustainable Development Goals should be useful for pursuing focused and coherent action on sustainable development. They shall contribute to the achievement of sustainable development. They shall serve as a driver for the implementation and mainstreaming of sustainable development within the UN system as a whole. And they shall address and be focused on priority areas for the achievement of sustainable development. So what is in the focus at the heart of these new global goals, benchmarks, is sustainable development, and what shall be focused on are priority areas, and what the priority areas are is what has been under discussion. Now, how does it matter to sustainable river basin management? We should remember the major challenges affecting our water resources. Remember the resources depletion, the resource degradation, climate change, growth, and our growing consumption as a principle of our current economies, the population growth and population densities matters or affects our water resources. The perspectives of the Sustainable Development Goals is based on a common global vision of progress towards a safe, just and sustainable space for all human beings to thrive on the planet. So this is a global vision that entails all of us, anybody on our planet, and should give space to prosperity, well-being of anybody on our planet. This applies to anywhere, any country, any person. So it's resting on moral principles that no one and no country should be left behind. Very different also, that approach. and that everyone and every country should be regarded as having a common responsibility for playing their part in delivering the global vision. Now, in addition to that, the perspective is that the challenges for developed and developing countries exist alike. This is again very different to the MDGs, which were the departing point, where a transfer from developed to developing countries was the primary objective. Remember, during our introduction, we were talking about GDP and the accumulation and redistribution of monetary wealth on a global scale, and we were able to see that that balance in terms of monetary wealth has changed very much from the developed to the so-called or previously called developing countries, which has led to the use of the term emerging economies. So that's why the challenges and approaches have very much changed, and it's not that simple anymore to categorize countries into developed and developing economies. So the challenges, however, of the developing countries are obvious and are still very much present. Some of the pressing development needs of the developing countries are poverty, addiction, water and sanitation, still education, and there's a long list of issues down to electricity supply, communication, telecommunication, information access, transportation, which are development needs of the so-called developing countries and are perceived as priorities, as major challenges. And it is because of the heritage of our developed countries achieve the development goals. Now, on the other side, there are challenges for the so-called developed countries, and we have touched upon some of them in earlier lectures as well. So you may remember the issue of urbanization, issues of migration, of degrowth of population numbers, which affect how our water supply systems can work, or how our services can be delivered. So the challenges of these developed countries are in the large transformational challenges. Those are essentially new economic paradigms that have to be defined, which have to prove themselves, which have to be enabled and developed. There are changes in patterns of behavior which have to be achieved, such as the patterns of consumption, the redefinition of well-being, etc. There must be a commitment of resources, and there must be an adjustment or reforms in policies and education which have to accommodate those transformational challenges. Now, those are fairly different from the dimensions developing countries are looking for, although all of those transformational changes equally are important and substantial to the so-called developing countries as well. Let's take an example of adjustments in the water resources management case of the European Union coming as a stakeholder-driven process. There is a so-called Water Alliance that developed in 2014 in a set of messages, and those were sent in January 2015 to the new EU commissioners, and they were highlighting the importance of water to the European economy, the environment and society. And this is quite an interesting approach because the Water Alliance brings together more than 500 so-called water stakeholders. And those water stakeholders represented there are from the research and innovation in water, from the water sector utilities, from European and national water sector federations and associations. They also include the large water users, industries and agriculture alike, the small and medium-sized enterprises, as well as decision makers. So that's why it is so interesting that there's an awareness and an action-oriented approach to advise and to steer decision-making at the highest or top level, influencing the EU decision-taking on water. The key points from this example identified by this EU Water Alliance in 2015, I want to demonstrate you here, is that sustainable management of Europe's water resources is essential to ensure a resilient energy union and forward-looking climate change policy. So it brings together two or three interesting aspects or important aspects. It's the sustainable management of a region, in this case the entire region of Europe, and including all the water resources within that large region. So it's not in this sense not an economic region, but a water resources region. And it brings together the importance and the important link between water resources and energy, energy management, the ability to achieve a change in our energy base is very much depending and linked to good water and sustainable water resources management. And it also brings together the aspect of climate change, which influences whether any of the other changes will take an effect or not. Now, the second point they highlighted was that there's know-how concentrated, especially in service provision and technology development and water resource management, including water pollution control, which can be made useful to not only solve problems in Europe, but also to solve problems globally. So obviously this has an economic dimension as well, but also has shows a serious effort to contribute to solving global issues, not sitting on solutions that work and provide a good space called Europe, but to connect that space to the globe and water aspects at a global scale and make that knowledge and the experiences available. And the third component in this is very important as well, which is that the fact that the European Union water legislation is unique, it is ambitious, and it is challenging. And in that combination, it provides a unique regulatory driver for innovation in the water-dependent economy. So this is I've mentioned that before, that there must be an enabling environment, an enabling institutional environment, legal environment for changes to take place, for processes to take place. And depending how this frame is being laid out, changes will take place, innovations will have space to come out or not. And in the case of this EU water legislation, very large, very ambitious steps are asked for, which call for innovation for the academic sector, for the research and innovation sector and industries to move forward, to find solutions, to change, step out of what is business as usual, and look for new best practices, new technologies which fulfill the new legal frames provided for. Now, this is in a way a historical momentum, because you remember that this came from a large-scale stakeholder movement in a non-violent way of proposing changes. The society as such is ready for such changes, and now in that respect, governments are asked to formulate and provide the enabling environment for the implementation. Obviously, there are always many challenges and probably also drawbacks to this, but we can consider something like this as historical momentum, which has to grow and took years, decades to grow and to come to that current point where the societies are pulling, where people, individuals are pulling and trying to contribute out of their positions. Now, I suggest you following literature, this list, but just as a startup, you can find much more about this, and you should read much more about this on your own and see how this can be applied to your specific environment in your country, in your region. With this, I want to close now, and I see you next time again.